He looked at the woman standing in the lobby of the Hargrove Grand Hotel and saw exactly what he wanted to see. He saw the natural hair. He saw the carry-on luggage that was one brand below what the regulars used. He saw brown skin and a reservation confirmation on a phone screen instead of a printed itinerary, and he decided, in the half-second it took him to size her up, that she did not belong here. What Douglas Payne, general manager of the Hargrove Grand, did not see was the Silver Star citation folded in her wallet. He did not see the 2 combat deployments to Iraq or the congressional commendation letter she had received 18 months earlier in a White House ceremony attended by fewer than 40 people. He did not see that the woman standing in front of his reception desk had, on 3 separate occasions, made decisions under fire that saved the lives of soldiers who are still alive today because of her. He saw a woman who looked out of place. He had no idea he was staring at Colonel Olivia Nkemdirim Osei, United States Army, and that he was about to make the worst professional decision of his life. The Hargrove Grand sat at the corner of Meridian Boulevard and Ashworth Avenue in Caldwell Falls, Virginia. It was the kind of hotel that put fresh orchids in the elevators and charged $42 for room service eggs. The clientele was old money, political money, and military brass on per diem. The carpets were burgundy and the chandeliers were imported. The staff wore pressed charcoal vests and spoke in the tone of people who had been trained to be helpful in a way that could double as dismissive. Colonel Nkemdirim Osei had driven 3 hours from Fort Drayton that Thursday afternoon to attend the retirement ceremony for Brigadier General Harold Watts, a man who had been her commanding officer during her first deployment, and who she considered one of the finest soldiers she had ever known. The ceremony was Friday at 1100. She had booked her room 6 weeks in advance. Confirmation number, GHR 77421, King Suite, non-smoking, 3rd floor. She was 44 years old. She wore civilian clothes because she was off duty. Dark trousers, a fitted navy blazer, low heels. Her posture was the kind you do not acquire in a yoga class. She set her phone on the counter and smiled at the young woman behind the desk. Checking in, Nkemdirim, N-K-E-M. The receptionist, a girl who could not have been older than 22, typed the name and found the reservation immediately. She began the standard check-in process, reaching for the keycard folder when Douglas Payne materialized from behind a partition near the concierge desk. He was 51, pale in the way of men who spent too much time under fluorescent light, with the careful hair of someone who had once been told he was handsome and had been living on that compliment for 2 decades. He wore a suit that cost more than it should have. He looked at Colonel Nkemdirim Osei. He looked at the receptionist. He placed one hand lightly on the counter between them. "I'll take this," he said to the girl, who stepped back without a word. He turned to Colonel Nkemdirim Osei with a smile that did not involve his eyes. "Good evening. How can I help you?" "Checking in," she said again. "My reservation should be under Nkemdirim Osei." Payne typed something, looked at the screen, typed something else. "I'm sorry," he said. "I'm not seeing a reservation under that name." Colonel Nkemdirim Osei blinked once. "I have the confirmation number, GHR 774219, booked 6 weeks ago. One moment." He typed again. His expression did not change. "I'm seeing an entry, but it appears this reservation was flagged for what? Credit card pre-authorization. It looks like the card on file didn't clear our security hold." She pulled out her Visa Black card and set it on the counter. "Run it now." Payne looked at the card without picking it up. "I'm afraid once a reservation is flagged, our policy requires additional verification. Do you have a government-issued ID, a letter of confirmation from a corporate account, or—" "I have my driver's license and my military ID," she said. "I also have the confirmation email, which shows my card was charged a deposit at the time of booking." She opened her email on the phone. The confirmation was there, date, time, card ending in 4417, deposit of $212, already processed. Payne glanced at the screen. He did not lean in to look closely. "I understand your frustration, but our system is showing a discrepancy. I wouldn't want you to get settled and then have a billing issue mid-stay. Perhaps I can recommend a property better suited to—" "Better suited," Colonel Nkemdirim Osei repeated. Her voice was very even. "Better suited to what, exactly, Mr. Payne?" He smiled, again. It was the smile of a man who had practiced turning cruelty into concern. "To your needs, we have a Holiday Inn Express about 4 miles east that is a wonderful property, very clean, and I believe they have availability tonight. The lobby was not empty. There was a couple near the elevator bank who had stopped pretending to look at their phones. A bellhop was standing very still near the luggage cart. The young receptionist had retreated to the far end of the desk and appeared to be staring at a wall. Colonel Nkemdirimosi looked at Douglas Payne for a moment without smouncing. It was the look of a woman who had assessed hostile terrain in the dark, with incomplete intelligence and lives depending on the accuracy of her judgment. She was not rattled, she was measuring. "I want to be very precise with you," she said quietly. "I have a confirmed reservation. I have the charge on my bank statement. I have the confirmation number. You are telling me my reservation does not exist, then suggesting I go to a less expensive property, after looking at me for approximately 4 seconds. Are we being accurate so far?" Payne's jaw tightened almost imperceptibly. I'm going to ask you once to honor my reservation," she said. "And I want you to think carefully before you answer." "Ma'am," Payne said, dropping the hospitality tone entirely. "I don't appreciate the implication. This is a business decision, not a personal one." "All right," she said. She picked up her phone and stepped away from the desk. She did not go outside. She did not go back to her car. She walked to the seating area near the fireplace in the lobby, sat down in one of the wingback chairs, and made a phone call. Payne watched her from across the lobby, satisfied that he had handled it. He had the receptionist begin resetting the key card system, as if the problem had been technical all along. He had no idea that the person on the other end of that phone call was Major General Constance Abubakar Osi, the Deputy Commanding General of the Military District of Washington, and Colonel Nkemdirim Osi's former classmate at West Point. He also had no idea that Brigadier General Harold Watts, the man whose retirement ceremony was the entire reason for this visit, sat on the board of directors of the Hargrove Group, the parent company of the Hargrove Grand. The next 30 minutes moved slowly on the surface and catastrophically beneath it. Payne returned to his office to handle what he described to his assistant as a routine displacement situation. He dictated a note to the file. Guest presented forged or erroneous reservation, offered alternative accommodations, declined, no further action required. He was still dictating when his desk phone rang. The voice on the other end was not angry. It was worse than angry. It was calm in the way that very large, very cold bodies of water are calm. "This is Harold Watts." Payne set down his pen. "General Watts." "Of course, sir, I understand you turned away one of my guests this evening." Payne's mouth opened. "Sir, there was a reservation issue. A billing discrepancy. Standard procedure for—" "I'm going to stop you there," Watts said. "Colonel Nkemdirim Osi called me approximately 12 minutes ago. I have the confirmation email she forwarded to me. I also have, on this phone, a photograph of the email you sent in October of last year to your senior staff regarding guests whose profile did not match the hotel's, quote, target demographic. I have been meaning to address that email for some time. I now have a reason." Payne's face had gone the color of old chalk. "I expect Colonel Nkemdirim Osi to be checked into her suite within the next 10 minutes, Watts continued. "I expect a written apology from you personally, on hotel letterhead, delivered to her room. And I expect you to know, Douglas, that I am calling my attorney first thing tomorrow morning, and I will be speaking to the Hargrove Group Board, of which I am a founding member, about what took place in that lobby tonight." The line went dead. Payne sat in his chair for 11 seconds without moving. Then he stood up and walked back to the front desk, and his face had the texture of a man who had just understood, very quickly and very finally, how badly he had miscalculated. Colonel Nkemdirim Osi was still in the wingback chair. She had ordered tea. She was reading something on her phone. She looked up when Payne crossed the lobby toward her, and the absence of surprise on her face was its own kind of verdict. "Colonel Nkemdirim Osi," Payne said. His voice had lost all its practiced smoothness. "I owe you an apology. There has been an error on our end, entirely our fault, and your suite is ready. Please allow me to personally escort you to check in." She looked at him for a moment. "The suite I booked 6 weeks ago." "Yes, ma'am." "The one your system couldn't find 30 minutes ago." "Yes, I apologize." "You don't need to explain," she said. She stood, picked up her phone and her carry-on. "I know what happened." She checked in. The young receptionist, the original girl, handled the key cards with shaking hands and kept saying "welcome" in a voice just above a whisper. Payne hovered at a distance that was simultaneously too close and too far, trying to be present without being visible. The suite was on the 3rd floor. The orchids in the elevator were purple that week. The room had a view of the Caldwell Falls city lights and a king bed with pillows that smelled like lavender. Colonel Nkemdirim set her bag down and stood at the window for a moment, looking at the lights. She had slept in a forward operating base outside of Mosul with a rifle across her knees. She had conducted a night raid in temperatures that the human body was not designed to endure. She had written letters to the families of soldiers who did not come home, and she had stood at attention at their funerals and held herself together, because that is what you do, because the uniform requires it. She was not shaking. She was not crying. She was not triumphant. She was tired in the specific way that black women in America get tired. A tiredness that has nothing to do with sleep. A tiredness that accumulates the way water damage accumulates. Invisible for a long time. And then suddenly, structurally, everywhere, she called her daughter, told her the room was fine, did not tell her the rest. Her daughter was 20 and did not yet understand that the rest is always there. The next morning, Brigadier General Watts's retirement ceremony was held in the Hargrove Grand's ballroom. 340 people attended. General Watts, in his remarks, specifically thanked Colonel Nkemdirim by name, describing her as the kind of officer who makes the army worth serving in. The room applauded for a long time. Douglas Payne was not present. He had called in sick. What he did not know was that the Hargrove Group had convened an emergency board call that morning. General Watts had sent the October email, the demographic targeting email, to the full board, along with a detailed account of the previous evening and a formal letter requesting Payne's removal. He had also forwarded both documents to a journalist at the Washington Post, who covered civil rights and corporate accountability. The story ran 4 days later. It was not front page. It did not need to be. It ran in the business section under the headline, Hargrove Grand Manager accused of discriminatory denial of service to decorated Army Colonel. It included a photograph of Colonel Nkemdirim in her dress uniform, taken at a congressional ceremony 2 years prior, standing beside a senator. The photograph did what photographs do. It made the abstract concrete. People shared it. By the end of the first day, the story had been picked up by 14 news outlets. By the end of the second day, it had been covered by 3 national networks. The video clips of the coverage circulated on social media in that particular way. That stories about power and race circulate, with fury, with recognition, with thousands of people typing. This happens all the time, because it does. The Hargrove Group stock dropped 4.2% over 3 trading days. The company's communications team issued a statement expressing deep regret and announcing an internal review of guest services protocols. The statement was 3 paragraphs long and contained the word committed 4 times. Douglas Payne was placed on administrative leave pending investigation on the 5th day. On the 9th day, his employment was terminated. The press release described it as a mutual separation. The severance agreement included a non-disparagement clause that Payne signed in a law office conference room while his attorney stared at the ceiling. He drove home through Caldwell Falls in the November rain, past the corner of Meridian and Ashworth, past the Hargrove Grand with its brass fixtures and its burgundy carpets and its imported chandeliers. He did not look at it. His wife had seen the news story before he could tell her. She had sat at the kitchen table with her coffee getting cold and read the article 3 times. She was not a cruel woman. She was a practical one, and what she felt sitting at that table was something closer to grief than anger. Grief for the version of her husband she had believed in for 22 years, the version who coached their son's Little League team and remembered their neighbors' birthdays and seemed, she had always thought, like a fundamentally decent man. She asked him one question when he walked through the door. "Did you know what you were doing?" He did not answer right away. She moved out the following month. Not dramatically, not with screaming. She packed in stages, methodically, the way people pack when they have already made a decision and are simply executing it. Their 2 sons, who were 17 and 20, spent the following Thanksgiving with her at her sister's in Charlotte. Payne spent it alone. The civil rights complaint, filed by Colonel Nkemdirim attorney with the Department of Housing and Urban Development, moved through the process with the grinding slowness that such complaints typically move. The Fair Housing Act covers hotels. What Payne had done, documented in the October email, corroborated by witness accounts from the receptionist and the bellhop, substantiated by the confirmation records that proved her reservation had existed all along, was not a grey area. The investigation concluded within 8 months. The settlement was not made public by Nkemdirimosi's choice, but it was described by her attorney as meaningful. What Payne had not counted on, what he could not have calculated in that half-second in the lobby when he made his decision, was that the bellhop near the luggage cart had a cousin who worked at the post. That the young receptionist had written down exactly what happened in her journal that night because she could not sleep. That General Watts was not a man who made calls and then forgot about them. That an October email sent to 8 people in a staff meeting had been saved as a screenshot by someone in that room who had been waiting for the right moment. Power is rarely as invisible as it believes itself to be. The people who witness its abuses often remember with a precision that the powerful never expect, because the powerful tend to assume that what they do in ordinary moments will never matter. They are almost always wrong. Colonel Nkemdirimose returned to Fort Drayton the morning after the ceremony. She had slept well. She ate breakfast in the hotel restaurant. The eggs were, in fact, $42, and she ordered them anyway because her reservation had been fully comped by the Hargrove Group's regional vice president, who had called her personally and apologized for 27 minutes. She had a full day ahead, a briefing at 0800, a meeting with 2 junior officers who were preparing for their first deployment. She had been working with them for 3 months, watching them get ready, answering their questions, trying to be the kind of senior officer who made the thing feel possible instead of terrifying. She thought about them on the drive back. She thought about the young receptionist, too, who had sent her an email 3 weeks later saying she had given her notice and enrolled in a paralegal program, and that the night Colonel Nkemdirimose had stood her ground. In that lobby was the reason she finally decided to stop letting things happen to her. That detail did not make it into the Washington Post article. Most of the details that actually matter never do. But that is how these things end usually. Not with a single clean verdict, not with a gavel sound that resolves everything, but with a slow, distributed accounting. A man sitting alone at Thanksgiving, a woman enrolled in school, a board that quietly rewrote its guest services policy, a photograph of a decorated officer that 3 million people shared because they recognized something in it that they had been trying to put into words for a long time. Douglas Payne looked at Colonel Olivia Nkemdirimose and saw someone he could dismiss. He saw a target. He could not see the Silver Star or the combat tours or the 340 people who would stand and applaud for her the next morning. But here is the thing, and this is the part that should stay with you long after this story ends. He should have treated her with dignity before he found any of that out, because it should not take a general's phone call, or a board member's intervention, or a journalist with a contact at the bellhop's cousin's desk for a person to be treated like a human being in a hotel lobby. The armor of rank and achievement and documentation should not be what stands between a black woman and basic respect. That is the uncomfortable truth underneath the satisfying story. The lesson here belongs to all of us. If this story moved you, if it made something rise up in your chest that you recognized, share it with someone who needs to hear it. Hit the like button, subscribe to Echoes of Justice, and tell us in the comments, do you think justice was truly served? Or did it only arrive because of who she turned out to be?